The ancient derelict ship floated in the darkness between stars like a forgotten dream. Its hull bore strange markings that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. For 3 days, the human exploration vessel Frontier had been studying this mysterious craft, trying to understand what they had discovered in the empty void of space. David Reynolds pressed his face against the observation deck window and watched the salvage teams work on the alien vessel. The ship was enormous, easily 10 times the size of their own vessel, yet it showed no signs of life or power. Whatever civilization had built this marvel had vanished long ago, leaving only questions behind. "Sir, we've managed to crack open one of the access ports," reported tech specialist Amy Ford over the communications system. "The interior is unlike anything we've seen before. The walls seem to be made of some kind of living metal that responds to touch." Reynolds nodded and made his way to the shuttle bay. Humanity had been exploring space for over 3 centuries, but they had never encountered anything like this. Most of the galaxy was controlled by the Valdorian Empire, an ancient civilization that treated younger species like servants. Humans were allowed to exist on 12 small worlds at the edge of known space, paying tribute to their scaled overlords and keeping their heads down. The shuttle ride to the derelict took only minutes, but Reynolds felt his excitement growing with each passing second. His team had been searching for new resources to help their struggling colonies when they stumbled upon this ghost ship. If they could understand its technology, maybe humanity could finally stand as equals in the galactic community. The interior of the alien vessel was breathtaking. Corridors stretched in impossible directions, their walls glowing with soft blue light that seemed to come from within the metal itself. Strange symbols covered every surface, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The air was clean and fresh, as if the ship's life support systems were still functioning after countless years. "The main computer core is this way," Amy said, leading the team deeper into the vessel. "We've been picking up strange energy readings from that direction." They walked through chambers filled with incomprehensible machinery and reached what appeared to be the control room. Banks of crystalline displays surrounded a central platform, their surfaces dark and inactive. In the center of the room stood a pedestal holding a sphere of pure light that hummed with barely contained power. "My God," whispered Dr. Michael Torres, the team's archaeologist. "This technology is beyond anything in our databases. These symbols match no known language in Galactic Federation records." Reynolds approached the central sphere carefully. As his hand drew near, the entire room suddenly came to life. Displays activated with streams of data in alien script, and the sphere began to pulse more rapidly. Then, without warning, images flooded his mind. He saw vast fleets of ships unlike any he had ever imagined, civilizations that spanned entire galaxies, wars fought with weapons that could reshape reality itself. And through it all, a single species that had risen above all others through their mastery of technology that bordered on magic. "The ancients," he whispered, somehow knowing the name of the vanished race. "They built this ship." The visions continued, showing him the rise and fall of countless civilizations. He watched as the ancients spread their influence across the universe, not through conquest but through the sharing of knowledge. They had been teachers and guardians, protecting younger species from threats too terrible to imagine, but something had gone wrong. Reynolds saw images of darkness spreading between the stars, consuming entire worlds and leaving nothing behind. The ancients had fought against this threat, but in the end, they had been forced to sacrifice themselves to save the galaxy. Before their extinction, they had scattered their most precious technology across space, hoping that someday a worthy successor would find it. The vision ended, leaving Reynolds gasping on the control room floor. His team rushed to help him stand, their faces filled with concern and confusion. "What happened, sir?" Amy asked. "You touched the sphere and then collapsed." Before Reynolds could answer, alarms began blaring throughout both ships. The Frontier's communications officer appeared on every display in the room, her face pale with fear. "Commander, we have a problem," she reported. "A massive Valdorian fleet just dropped out of hyperspace. They're demanding to speak with you immediately." Reynolds looked at the sphere of light still pulsing gently in its crystal housing. Whatever the ancients had hidden in this ship, the Valdorians wanted it. And knowing their overlords, they would not take no for an answer. The shuttle ride back to the frontier felt like a journey to his own execution. Through the viewports, Reynolds could see the Valdorian fleet surrounding them. Hundreds of massive warships bristled with weapons, their dark hulls bearing the Empire's symbol of conquest. At their center sat the flagship of Supermarch Thale, one of the most feared military commanders in known space. "Supermarch Thale is requesting immediate communication," reported the communications officer as Reynolds stepped onto his ship's bridge. "He says you have something that belongs to the Empire." Reynolds straightened his uniform and nodded. "Put him through." The main display activated, showing the imposing figure of the Valdorian commander. Thale's scaled skin was a deep green color, and his yellow eyes burned with barely controlled rage. Like all of his species, he towered over humans by nearly 2 feet, his powerful frame encased in ceremonial armor. "Human," Thale said, his voice carrying the arrogance of 10,000 years of supremacy. "You have discovered something that does not belong to you. Ancient technology is the rightful property of the Valdorian Empire, as decreed by the oldest laws of this galaxy." "With respect, Supermarch," Reynolds replied, trying to keep his voice steady, "we found this vessel in unclaimed space. According to Federation salvage laws, it belongs to whoever discovered it." Thale's laughter was like the sound of grinding metal. "Federation laws? You forget your place, little human? Your species exists only because we allow it. You pay tribute to us, because we are your betters. You will surrender that ship immediately, or face the consequences of your defiance." Reynolds felt something stir within him, a memory from the ancient ship's visions. He saw images of proud civilizations that had refused to bow to tyranny's species, that had stood against impossible odds to protect their freedom. The ancients had believed in the potential of younger races to rise above their circumstances. "I need to consult with my government," Reynolds said finally. "Give me 1 solar cycle to contact Earth." Thale's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You have exactly 1 solar cycle, human. Then you will surrender the ancient vessel, or I will take it from the debris of your pathetic fleet. Choose wisely." The transmission ended, leaving Reynolds alone with his thoughts and the weight of an impossible decision. Outside his ship's windows, the ancient vessel continued to pulse with mysterious light. Holding secrets that could change the balance of power in the galaxy forever, he activated his ship's long-range communications array and began composing a message to Earth. Humanity stood at a crossroads, and the choice they made in the next 24 hours would determine whether they remained slaves or finally claimed their rightful place among the stars. The die was cast, and the galaxy would never be the same. The message from Earth arrived exactly 23 hours after Thale's ultimatum. President Maria Santos appeared on the secure channel, her face calm despite the magnitude of the decision she was announcing to the galaxy. "Commander Reynolds," she said, her voice carrying across the vast emptiness of space, "the Terran Republic will not bow to tyranny. We have studied the data you transmitted about the ancient vessel, and our scientists believe this technology could revolutionize human civilization. You are ordered to defend the ship at all costs." Reynolds closed the channel and looked out at the Valdorian fleet surrounding his position. Over 10,000 warships had gathered around the human colony world of New Geneva, their dark hulls blotting out the stars themselves. It was the largest armada ever assembled by the Empire, a force capable of burning entire solar systems to ash. The ancient ship floated silently between the 2 fleets, its crystalline hull reflecting the light of New Geneva's sun. Over the past day, Reynolds and his team had made incredible discoveries within its databanks. The vessel contained manufacturing templates for weapons and defensive systems that defied every known law of physics. Most importantly, they had learned that the ship's systems responded to human neural patterns in ways they did not for other species. "Sir," Amy Ford reported from her station aboard the ancient vessel, "I've managed to activate the primary weapon systems The ship is unlike anything in our databases. Its weapons seem to manipulate reality itself, bending space and time to strike targets. Reynolds nodded and made his final preparations. 300 human ships had answered the call to defend New Geneva, but they were hopelessly outmatched by Thales' armada. Their only hope lay in the mysterious technology they had discovered, and in the courage of ordinary people who refused to surrender their freedom. Thales' flagship moved forward, its massive bulk dwarfing even the largest human vessels. Across all frequencies, the supermarch's voice boomed through space with the confidence of absolute power. "Your time is up, humans," he declared. "Surrender the ancient ship now, or watch your pathetic species burn?" "This is Commander Reynolds of the Terran Republic," came the reply. "We reject your demands. This ship belongs to humanity, and we will defend it with our lives." Thales' response was immediate and brutal. The Valdorian fleet opened fire without warning, launching thousands of energy beams and plasma torpedoes toward the human formation. The sky around New Geneva lit up with the fury of weapons designed to crack planets apart, but something impossible happened. The ancient ship suddenly blazed with inner light, its hull transforming from crystal to liquid metal that flowed like water. Reynolds felt the ship's systems merge with his consciousness, and suddenly he understood. The vessel was not just a machine, but a living extension of its pilot's will. The ancient ship phased through the incoming fire like a ghost, the enemy weapons passing harmlessly through its hull. Then it struck back with fury beyond imagination. Beams of pure energy lanced out from its crystalline weapons, but these were not ordinary lasers. They twisted space itself, creating tears in reality that reached out to touch Valdorian ships. Across impossible distances, the first wave of enemy vessels simply ceased to exist. One moment they were there, firing their weapons with confidence, and the next they were scattered atoms drifting in the void. The ancient ship's weapons ignored. Shields and armor striking directly at the molecular bonds that held matter together. "Impossible," Thale whispered as he watched his invincible fleet crumble before a single human-controlled vessel. "That technology should not exist." The ancient ship continued its devastating attack, moving through the Valdorian formation like a dancer among statues. It phased in and out of normal space, appearing behind enemy vessels to deliver killing strikes before vanishing again. Each shot from its weapons destroyed multiple targets, the exotic energy cascading from ship to ship in chains of annihilation. Within minutes, over 3,000 Valdorian vessels had been reduced to debris. The survivors began to panic, their disciplined formations breaking apart as captains tried desperately to escape the impossible enemy that hunted them. But the ancient ship was everywhere at once, its reality-warping drives allowing it to appear anywhere within the battle zone instantly. Reynolds felt the ship's joy as it fought, the ancient AI reveling in its return to purpose after eons of silence. Through their neural link, he experienced the vessel's memories of countless battles against forces that threatened galactic civilization. The ship had been designed to protect the innocent and punish those who would prey upon the weak. "Retreat," Thale finally ordered, his voice cracking with fear and rage. "All ships, immediate withdrawal to hyperspace." But the ancient ship was not finished. As the Valdorian fleet tried to escape, beams of twisted light reached out to cripple their faster-than-light drives. Hundreds of vessels found themselves trapped in normal space, helpless before the impossible human weapon that defied every law of physics and warfare. The battle ended with over 8,000 Valdorian ships destroyed or disabled. The survivors fled into hyperspace, carrying word of their defeat back to the Empire's core worlds. For the first time in 3 centuries of subjugation, humanity had won a decisive victory against their overlords. Across human space, celebrations erupted as news of the victory spread. On 12 worlds, people danced in the streets and sang songs of freedom they had not dared voice for generations. The impossible had happened. Humanity had found a weapon that could stand against the Valdorian Empire, but Reynolds felt no joy as he disconnected from the ancient ship systems. During his link with the vessel, he had accessed more of its databanks and discovered a terrifying truth. The ship's long-range sensors had detected something moving in the darkness between galaxies, something vast and hungry that was heading directly toward the Milky Way. The ship's AI, which called itself the Observer, materialized as a hologram. In the control room, it appeared as a figure of pure light, neither male nor female, but somehow deeply alien despite its humanoid shape. "Commander Reynolds," the Observer said, its voice like the whisper of stellar winds. "You have passed the first test. Your species shows the courage and adaptability that we sought when we scattered our technology across the galaxy. But greater trials await." "What are you talking about?" Reynolds asked. "What trials?" The Observer gestured, and the room filled with images of cosmic horror. Ships the size of moons emerged from the void between stars, their hulls black as the space between atoms. Wherever they went, stars went dark and entire civilizations vanished without a trace. "The silence," the Observer whispered. "They are the reason my people chose extinction over surrender. They consume entire galaxies to fuel their expansion across the universe. Our technology has awakened them, and they are coming." Reynolds felt his blood turn to ice as he watched the approaching fleet. Each vessel was larger than Earth's moon, and there were thousands of them moving through the cosmic void with inexorable purpose. Behind them came something even worse, a darkness that swallowed light itself. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Perhaps 1 solar year," the Observer replied. "Maybe less. The silence moves slowly between galaxies, but once they arrive, they will sweep through our home in a matter of months. You must prepare your species, Commander. The real war is about to begin." Reynolds looked out at the debris field that had once been the Valdorian fleet. They had won one battle against an empire that had ruled for 10,000 years, but now they faced an enemy that had destroyed civilizations far greater than anything in the current galaxy. Humanity stood at the threshold of their greatest challenge, and their survival would depend on mastering technology that had been ancient when the first stars were young. The ancients had chosen them as heirs to galactic civilization, but that inheritance came with a price that might be too terrible to pay. The victory celebration continued on New Geneva below, but Reynolds knew the truth. The war for humanity's freedom had only just begun. Emperor Valdric stood before the throne of stars, his ancient eyes burning with rage that had been building for 10,000 years. The massive chamber on the Valdorian homeworld echoed with the footsteps of his generals and advisors, all of them bearing news of humanity's impossible victory at New Geneva. "Explain to me," Valdric said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "how a single human vessel destroyed 8,000 ships of our glorious fleet." General Corvin, scarred veteran of 100 campaigns, stepped forward with obvious reluctance. "My Emperor, the humans have acquired ancient technology beyond our understanding. Their vessel phases through solid matter and fires weapons that ignore our shields and armor. Our tactical computers cannot even track its movement patterns." Valdric slammed his massive fist against the crystalline throne, sending cracks racing through the ancient structure. For 10 millennia, the Valdorian Empire had ruled the galaxy through superior technology and ruthless efficiency. No species had ever successfully challenged their authority, and certainly not the pathetic humans who scraped out an existence on 12 minor worlds. "Summon every fleet commander in the Empire," the Emperor commanded. "Call in our vassals from every corner of known space. If humanity wants war, we will give them such a war that their name will be forgotten before the stars grow cold." Meanwhile, deep in human space, the shipyards of Earth worked around the clock to produce vessels that incorporated both human engineering and ancient technology. The Observer had shared manufacturing templates with human scientists, teaching them to build ships that bent the laws of physics to their will. Admiral Lisa Shun watched the first of the new vessels take shape in the orbital shipyards above Luna. The ships were smaller than traditional Valdorian dreadnoughts, but far more advanced, their hulls composed of the same living metal found in the ancient vessel. Each ship was equipped with reality-warping drives and weapons that could strike targets across impossible distances. "The construction rate is unprecedented," reported Chief Engineer Robert Kim. We're completing one vessel every 6 hours from each shipyard. At this rate, we'll have over 1,000 new ships within the month. Chun nodded, but her attention was focused on something far more disturbing. Long-range sensors had detected massive energy signatures at the galaxy's edge, dark shapes moving between the stars with terrible purpose. The Silence Fleet had arrived ahead of schedule, and they were already beginning their systematic consumption of the outer rim worlds. The first reports came from automated monitoring stations along the galactic frontier. One by one, the signals went dark as the Silence Fleet swept through empty space like a plague of living darkness. Entire star systems simply vanished, leaving behind only the cold void where thriving civilizations had existed moments before. Captain Tom Blake received the first visual confirmation of the enemy from his deep space patrol vessel Defiant. His ship had been investigating the sudden silence from the Rigel sector when they encountered something that defied rational explanation. "My God," whispered sensor operator Jenny Walsh. "Captain, you need to see this." The main display showed what remained of the Rigel system. Where once 12 planets had orbited a bright blue star, now there was only empty space. The star itself flickered weakly, its nuclear fire somehow being drained by massive organic vessels that attached themselves to its surface like cosmic parasites. The ships of the Silence were unlike anything in human records. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, its hull composed of what appeared to be living tissue that pulsed with alien life. They moved without visible propulsion systems, somehow manipulating gravity itself to glide through space with predatory grace. "Get us out of here," Blake ordered, but it was too late. The nearest Silence vessel had detected their presence and was moving to intercept. Tentacles of living darkness reached across space, grasping for the tiny human ship like the fingers of some cosmic nightmare. Blake's ship survived only because it was equipped with ancient phase shift technology. The vessel slipped sideways through dimensional barriers, escaping into hyperspace just as the alien tentacles closed around empty vacuum. The encounter lasted less than 30 seconds, but it confirmed humanity's worst fears about their new enemy. Back on Earth, President Santos convened an emergency session of the Terran Council. Representatives from all 12 human worlds gathered via hologram to discuss the approaching threat that dwarfed even the Valdorian Empire in its scope and horror. "The Silence Fleet contains approximately 10,000 vessels," reported intelligence Director Michael Torres. "Each ship is capable of consuming entire worlds to fuel its expansion. At their current rate of advance, they will reach the inner galaxy within 6 months." "What about the Valdorians?" asked Governor Patricia Williams of the New Geneva colony. "Surely they understand that this threat affects everyone in the galaxy." Santos shook her head grimly. "Emperor Valdrix has declared a holy war against humanity. His pride will not allow him to negotiate with species he considers inferior. He would rather see the galaxy burn than admit that humans might be his equals." The discussion was interrupted by an urgent transmission from Admiral Chun in Earth orbit. Her face appeared on the council chamber's main display, her expression tense with barely controlled fear. "Madam President, we're receiving distress calls from across the outer rim. The Silence isn't just consuming empty systems anymore. They've reached inhabited worlds, and the results are beyond horrific." The transmission shifted to show footage recovered from the final moments of the mining colony on Vega Prime. The images were fragmentary and distorted, but they showed clearly what happened when the Silence encountered organized resistance. The alien vessels deployed clouds of dark energy that simply erased living beings from existence, converting their matter and consciousness into fuel for the fleet's expansion. "Estimated casualties from the outer rim exceed 50 million beings," Chun continued. "Refugee fleets from dozens of species are fleeing toward the inner systems, but most won't make it. The Silence ships are faster than anything we've ever encountered." Reynolds, now promoted to admiral following his victory at New Geneva, accessed the ancient vessel's long-range sensors to track the approaching threat. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Silence fleet was accelerating as it consumed more worlds, growing stronger with each system it devoured. "There's something else," The observer's holographic form materialized beside him. The silence operates as a collective consciousness, but they're not naturally occurring beings. They were created as weapons by a civilization that destroyed itself in the distant past. Their only purpose is consumption and expansion. Can they be stopped? Reynolds asked. My people tried for 1,000 years before choosing extinction over surrender, the observer replied. But you humans have shown capabilities that surprise even us. Your species adapts to ancient technology in ways we never anticipated. Perhaps you will succeed where we failed. The conversation was interrupted by proximity alarms throughout human space. The Valdorian fleet had arrived, not just at New Geneva, but at every human world simultaneously. Emperor Valdrix had assembled the largest military force in galactic history, over 50,000 warships drawn from every corner of his empire on the flagship Eternal Glory. Valdrix himself issued a final ultimatum to humanity. His massive form filled communication screens across 12 worlds as he delivered his judgment with the certainty of absolute power. Humans, he declared, you have violated the natural order of this galaxy. Your defiance of Valdorian authority cannot be tolerated. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Continue your rebellion, and we will make your suffering legendary. President Santos responded from Earth, her voice carrying clearly across the void despite the massive Valdorian fleet surrounding her homeworld. Emperor Valdrix, there is a threat approaching that makes our conflict insignificant. The Silence Fleet will consume everything in this galaxy unless we unite against them. I propose an immediate ceasefire so that we can face our common enemy. Together, Valdrix's laughter echoed through space like the sound of worlds dying. You seek to distract us with phantom threats while your ancient ship prepares to strike. But we are ready for your tricks this time, humans. Nothing will save you from the justice of the Empire. The Valdorian fleet opened fire on every human world simultaneously, beginning the largest war in galactic history. But even as the two civilizations tore each other apart, something far worse watched from the darkness between stars. The Silence Fleet continued its inexorable advance, consuming everything in its path as it moved toward the galaxy's heart. The real war for survival was about to begin, and neither humans nor Valdorians were prepared for what was coming. The war between humanity and the Valdorian Empire raged across 12 star systems with a fury that shook the foundations of galactic civilization. Emperor Valdrix had committed everything to this final assault, deploying weapons that had been forbidden for centuries and strategies that sacrificed entire fleets for tactical advantage. General Robert Hayes crouched in the ruins of New Tokyo's primary defense center as Valdorian bombardment shook the underground complex. His forces had been fighting for 3 days straight, using ancient enhanced weapons to hold back an enemy that outnumbered them 50-1. Sir, the orbital defense platforms are failing, reported Lieutenant Colonel Susan Martinez, her uniform torn and bloodied from the constant battle. The Valdorians are bringing up their planet crackers. We have maybe 6 hours before they can breach the planetary shields. Hayes checked his tactical display and felt his heart sink. Across human space, the same scene was playing out. 12 worlds under simultaneous assault by an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 10 millennia. Their new ships were impressive, but they were still vastly outnumbered by Valdrix's armada. Patch me through to Admiral Reynolds, he ordered. We need the ancient ship here now, or Earth falls within the day. Reynolds was fighting his own desperate battle above the colony world of New Geneva, where the war had begun. The ancient ship phased through enemy fire as it had before, but this time the Valdorians were ready. They had developed new tactics, using coordinated quantum torpedoes to create spatial distortions that forced the vessel back into normal space where it could be targeted. Admiral, the ship's phase drives are overloading, Amy Ford reported from her station. We can't maintain intangibility much longer. Whatever they're using, it's disrupting our dimensional manipulation systems. Reynolds gritted his teeth as another salvo of enemy fire barely missed their hull. The Valdorians had been studying recordings of their previous defeat, developing countermeasures for ancient technology. They might not understand how the weapons worked, but they had found ways to interfere with their operation. "Signal all human vessels," he ordered. "Full tactical withdrawal to the Centauri system. We make our stand there." But even as the human fleet began its fighting retreat, reports continued to pour in from the galactic edge. The silence had consumed another 100 star systems in the past week, their massive fleet growing stronger with each world they devoured. Refugee ships from dozens of species fled toward the inner systems, carrying tales of horror that defied rational thought. Captain Ann Foster commanded one of the new human destroyers in the defense of the Mars orbital shipyards. Her vessel, the Indomitable, mounted weapons that could punch holes through reality itself. But even ancient technology had limits when facing such overwhelming numbers. "Enemy dreadnought closing on our starboard flank," called out Tactical Officer James Wright. "It's one of their new models, heavily shielded against exotic energy." Foster watched as the massive Valdorian vessel moved to crush her smaller ship. The enemy had learned from their defeats, upgrading their shields and weapons to better handle ancient technology. The war was becoming a brutal contest of adaptation, each side developing new tactics to counter their opponent's advantages. "Fire quantum torpedoes, full spread," she ordered. "Target their primary reactor?" The weapons struck with devastating force, but the Valdorian vessel's shields held. In response, it launched a barrage of plasma missiles that overwhelmed the Indomitable's defenses. Foster felt her ship shudder as the enemy weapons found their target, tearing through hull plating and sending shockwaves through the crew compartments. The tide of battle turned at the Centauri system, where Reynolds had gathered the remnants of humanity's fleet for what many believed would be their final stand. Over 300 human vessels faced more than 10,000 Valdorian ships in a confrontation that would determine the fate of both civilizations. Commander Tom Blake piloted his stealth frigate Shadow through the enemy formation, using ancient phase shift technology to appear behind enemy vessels and deliver killing strikes before vanishing again. His tactics were working, but for every Valdorian ship he destroyed, 10 more took its place. "Tom, this is Admiral Reynolds," came the voice over his comm system. "I need you to target their command ship. If we can take out Valdrix, maybe we can end this war before the silence arrives." Blake acknowledged the order and began his approach. To the Eternal Glory, the massive flagship that served as Emperor Valdrix's mobile throne. The vessel was surrounded by defensive screens and escort ships, but Blake had learned to use ancient technology in ways that surprised even the observer. His ship slipped through dimensional barriers, appearing inside the enemy formation before anyone could react. Quantum torpedoes launched from point-blank range, striking the flagship's command section with enough force to vaporize a small moon, but Valdrix had survived 10,000 years of warfare by being prepared for every possibility. Emergency shields activated around his command center, absorbing the massive explosion and keeping the Emperor alive long enough to issue new orders. "All ships, focus fire on the human fleet," Valdrix commanded, his voice carrying across space despite the damage to his vessel. "I want every human ship destroyed, no matter the cost to our own forces." The Valdorian fleet responded with suicidal fury, ramming human vessels when their weapons failed to penetrate ancient shields. The battle devolved into a chaotic melee, as both sides threw everything they had into a final, desperate assault. Reynolds felt the ancient ship system strain under the massive coordinated attack. Even technology that could manipulate reality had limits, and they were fast approaching theirs. Around him, human vessels were falling one by one, their crews fighting to the last breath against impossible odds. Then something changed. The observer's holographic form appeared in the ship's control center, but now it looked different somehow, more solid and present than before. "Admiral Reynolds," it said, "there is one last gift my people left for their successors, but using it will forever change your species." "What kind of gift?" Reynolds asked, even as enemy fire hammered their shields. "Complete neural integration with ancient technology," the observer explained. Your consciousness would merge with our ship systems, allowing you to think and fight as we once did. But the process is irreversible. You would become something more than human, but also something less. Reynolds looked at the tactical display showing his fleet being systematically destroyed. Humanity faced extinction whether they won or lost this battle, because the silence would consume whatever remained. They needed every advantage they could get. "Do it," he said. The transformation was instantaneous and overwhelming. Reynolds felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of his physical body, merging with the ancient ship's quantum computer systems. Suddenly, he could perceive space and time as malleable constructs, reality as something to be shaped rather than endured. The ancient ship blazed with new power as Reynolds' enhanced consciousness took control. Its weapons no longer simply fired energy beams but reached through dimensions to strike targets across impossible distances. Enemy ships began exploding throughout the Valdorian fleet as reality-warping attacks found them regardless of range or defensive measures. "Impossible," Valdrix whispered as he watched his invincible armada crumble before the transformed human vessel. "What have they become?" The battle ended within minutes as the ancient ship systematically destroyed every Valdorian vessel in the system. Reynolds, now something far beyond his original humanity, felt the ship's joy at returning to full power after eons of dormancy. But victory brought no celebration. Long-range sensors detected the Silence Fleet breaking through the galactic barrier, their massive vessels beginning the systematic consumption of the inner systems. The real war was about to begin, and both humans and Valdorians would need to work together if they hoped to survive what was coming. Emperor Valdrix, his flagship crippled and his fleet destroyed, finally understood the true scope of the threat facing all life in the galaxy. As rescue ships from both sides worked to save survivors from the battle, he sent a message to President Santos on Earth. "Human," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of 10,000 years of pride finally broken. "Perhaps it is time we discussed terms for an alliance." The Silence continued their inexorable advance, and the galaxy's last hope lay in the unity of two species that had been enemies since they first met among the stars. The Silence main fleet emerged from the void between galaxies like a cancer made manifest in the physical universe. Their vessels were so massive that they dwarfed entire solar systems, living ships that pulsed with alien hunger as they consumed star after star to fuel their inexorable advance. Admiral Reynolds, his consciousness now permanently merged with the ancient ship's quantum systems, watched the approaching nightmare through sensors that could perceive across multiple dimensions. What he saw chilled him to his transformed core. Each Silence vessel was not just a ship, but a fragment of a collective mind that had devoured entire galaxies in its quest for expansion. "The enemy fleet contains approximately 12,000 primary vessels," he reported to the Joint Command Center established in the ruins of the Valdorian flagship. "Each ship is capable of consuming an entire star system within hours. At their current rate of advance, they will reach the galactic core in less than 2 months." Emperor Valdrix, his pride finally broken by the magnitude of the threat they faced, studied the tactical displays with growing horror. His empire had ruled for 10 millennia, but it had never encountered anything like this cosmic plague that consumed everything in its path. "What weapons do we have that can damage vessels of that size?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. "Conventional weapons are useless," replied Dr. Torres, now serving as chief scientist for the Human Valdorian Alliance. "Our quantum torpedoes might scratch their hulls, but they regenerate damage almost instantly. We need something that can attack their collective consciousness directly." The War Council was interrupted by urgent reports from the Outer Rim. Captain Blake's stealth frigate had been monitoring the Silence advance when they encountered something even more terrifying than the main fleet. Behind the primary vessels came something that defied rational description, a darkness so absolute that it seemed to devour light itself. "It's not just a fleet," Blake reported, his voice barely steady. "There's something else behind them, something that makes those moon-sized ships look insignificant." Whatever it is, it's the size of a gas giant and it's converting entire stars into raw energy. The Alliance fleet gathered at the galactic core represented the combined might of two civilizations that had been enemies for centuries, human vessels. Equipped with ancient technology, flew alongside Valdorian dreadnoughts, their crews working together despite generations of mutual hatred. Admiral Chun commanded the human contingent while General Corvin led the Valdorian forces, both serving under Reynolds' overall strategic command. The shipyards of 100 worlds worked without rest to produce vessels for the final battle. Human factories turned out reality-warping frigates while Valdorian foundries built massive battle platforms equipped with weapons that could crack planets. Every civilian who could hold a weapon was pressed into service as the two species prepared for a war that would determine the fate of all life in the galaxy. President Santos addressed the combined fleet from her command ship, her words broadcast to every vessel in the armada. "We stand at the threshold of extinction," she declared. "But we do not stand alone. Human and Valdorian, we fight together now against an enemy that would consume everything we have ever built or dreamed. This day will be remembered as the moment our species chose to stand as one against the darkness." The Silence fleet arrived at the galactic core like a tide of living shadow. Their massive vessels moved without visible propulsion, manipulating gravity itself to glide through space with predatory grace. As they advanced, stars began to dim and die, their nuclear fire being drained by alien parasites that fed on the fundamental forces of creation. The first engagement took place at the Rigel system, where a combined human-Valdorian task force attempted to slow the enemy advance. Captain Foster's destroyer Indomitable led the attack, her quantum torpedoes striking the nearest Silence vessel with enough force to shatter a moon. The weapons had no visible effect. The alien ship absorbed the energy and continued its advance, tentacles of living darkness reaching out to envelop the attacking vessels. Foster watched in horror as Valdorian dreadnoughts simply vanished when touched by the alien appendages, their matter converted into fuel for the Silence Collective. "All ships, immediate withdrawal," she ordered, but it was too late for many of her comrades. The Silence vessels deployed clouds of dark energy that erased entire squadrons from existence, leaving behind only empty space where brave warriors had fought moments before. Reynolds felt the deaths of every pilot through his enhanced consciousness, each loss a wound in his transformed mind. The Silence was not just destroying their ships, but consuming the very essence of their crews, adding their knowledge and memories to the collective that had already devoured countless civilizations across the universe. "We need a new strategy," he transmitted to the Alliance command. "Conventional tactics are useless against an enemy that can simply erase our weapons from existence." The Observer's holographic form materialized in the command center, its features showing strain that had not been visible before. "There is one possibility," it said slowly. "My people discovered that consciousness itself could be weaponized against the Silence. But the process requires linking every artificial intelligence in the galaxy into a single network." "What kind of network?" asked Emperor Valdrix, his scaled features showing confusion at concepts beyond his understanding. "A psychic assault," Reynolds explained, his enhanced mind grasping the implications immediately. "We link every ship's AI system together and use human intuition to guide the attack. The Silence operates as a collective consciousness, so we fight mind against mind instead of ship against ship." The plan was desperate and untested, but it was their only hope. Across the galaxy, technicians worked frantically to establish quantum links between every artificial intelligence in the Alliance fleet. Human ships with their ancient enhanced computers served as primary nodes, while Valdorian vessels provided processing power and stability to the network. The final battle began as the Silence fleet reached the inner systems. Their largest vessels, each one the size of a gas giant, began the systematic consumption of inhabited worlds. Billions of beings died in the first minutes of the assault, as entire civilizations were reduced to raw energy to fuel the alien advance. Reynolds, now serving as the primary interface for the combined AI network, felt his consciousness expand beyond anything he had ever imagined. Through thousands of ship computers, he could perceive the battle from every angle simultaneously. More importantly, he could sense the alien collective mind that controlled the Silence Fleet. "All ships, initiate quantum link protocols," he commanded. "Prepare for psychic assault." The network activated with a flash of light that illuminated half the galaxy. Every human and Valdorian AI system merged into a single vast intelligence guided by Reynolds' enhanced consciousness. The resulting entity was neither fully organic nor completely artificial, but something entirely new that combined the best aspects of both. The psychic attack struck the Silence Collective like a thunderbolt of pure thought. For the first time in millions of years, the alien hive mind experienced something it had never known: doubt. The network's assault was not physical but conceptual, attacking the very foundations of the Silence's shared consciousness. Reynolds felt the enemy's confusion as individual Silence vessels began to act independently for the first time in eons. The collective mind that had bound them together for countless millennia was fragmenting under the assault of unified organic and artificial intelligence working in perfect harmony. "It's working," reported Captain Blake from his position near the enemy fleet. "Their ships are turning on each other. The collective is breaking down." The battle reached its climax as the largest Silence vessel, the gas giant-sized entity that served as the collective's primary consciousness, began to convulse with internal conflict. The psychic network poured everything into a final assault, pushing human creativity and Valdorian determination through AI systems enhanced with ancient technology. The enemy collective shattered like glass struck by a hammer. Across the galaxy, Silence vessels went dark as their shared consciousness collapsed into chaos. Some ships began consuming each other in mindless hunger, while others simply shut down completely, their crews dying as the hive mind that had sustained them for eons finally failed. The war ended not with explosions or violence, but with silence as the alien fleet turned inert and lifeless. The threat that had consumed entire galaxies was finally defeated, not by superior weapons, but by the power of unified consciousness, working toward a common goal. Reynolds slowly disconnected from the AI network, his transformed mind struggling to readjust to individual existence after experiencing collective thought on such a massive scale. Around him, the surviving ships of both species began the long process of recovery and reconstruction. Emperor Valdrix approached President Santos in the aftermath of victory, his massive form somehow diminished by the magnitude of what they had accomplished together. "Human," he said formally, "the Valdorian Empire acknowledges the sovereignty of the Terran Republic. We pledge our alliance in rebuilding what the Silence has destroyed." The galaxy that emerged from the ashes of the war was transformed beyond recognition. Humanity had evolved from a minor rim species to the guardians of galactic civilization, their ancient enhanced ships patrolling the void to ensure that the darkness between the stars would never again threaten the light of life. The Observer appeared one final time as Reynolds stood on the bridge of the ancient ship, watching reconstruction efforts begin across 100 worlds. "My people chose their successors well," it said with something that might have been pride. "You have proven that consciousness united in purpose can overcome any threat. The galaxy is safe in your hands." As the hologram faded, Reynolds felt the weight of responsibility settle on his transformed shoulders. Humanity had won the right to exist as equals among the stars, but with that victory came the duty to protect those who could not protect themselves. The war was over, but the real work of building a better galaxy had only just begun.